US universities changed their patent practices last year in a way that you probably wouldn't see coming. So I'm looking at Autumn statistics right now for fiscal year 2025. These are numbers that came out last year. If you don't know, Autumn's the Association of University Technology Managers. They're the main association for tech transfer offices. And every major US university has a tech transfer office commercializing the university's research. I'm looking at some stats, and a lot of things that happened in 2025 were things you would expect. So university invention disclosures were up about 8%. That means 8% more inventions being given by professors to their tech transfer offices with the goal of commercialization. And you might say, well, why would it increase 8%? Well, the explanation is also in the report. US research and development at universities increased by about 8% the same year. It was actually 8.1. So if research increases by 8%, you expect disclosures to increase by 8%. Since those numbers correspond, nothing really changed, just a little bit more research. There were some other changes that happened that were really on trend. So new university-related startups increased by 15%. Those are startup companies launched by universities. And 15% is a pretty good jump. That's great and encouraging. And this has been part of a longer trend over the past 15 or 20 years. The universities have shifted from licensing to established companies to licensing to startup companies. And it's not necessarily because universities got together and decided we're going to launch more startup companies. I think we should do that, but that's not what really happened. What happened is increasingly corporations have become risk averse with university technologies. And there's been a trend towards looking to universities for research and development, but requiring startups to be launched before acquiring those technologies. So I've repeatedly had conversations with established companies where they say, look, we'd like a technology at your university. We want to license it. We want to commercialize it, but we can't take a risk on a raw technology. So go license a startup company. If it's successful, then we'll try to acquire that company. And there's just been, for many financial reasons, a shift in that direction. So I think the increase in startups is not surprising, although 15% is a little higher than I would have expected. Quite good. Total licensing activity increased by about 7%. The Autumn stats note also that option agreements increased by 10%. I don't care about that. So an option agreement is when you give someone a right to enter into a contract, a license. So you could say, a company might say, we need to do due diligence before we acquire this technology, before we license it. So let's enter into an option agreement so we can do our due diligence without worrying that you're going to turn around the license to someone else. And then during that option period, if we say, yes, we're doing it, we'll do a deal. So the problem with option agreements as a metric is that they're so manipulable. You could tack on an option agreement on the front of any license agreement if you want to. It's really just a matter of taste and preference. And so not going to put much weight on that. But the increase in licensing by 7% is interesting. It's a move in the right direction. It's different than the amount of disclosure, so it might represent actual improvement in the industry. And then one that really stood out is copyright licensing has increased by 5%. So most of what you think of as tech transfer is licensing patents. We're protecting actual inventions. But as a proportion, copyright is increasing. So that probably means that more software is being licensed. And that should happen because software is easier to create than ever. So you'd expect professors to be creating more software. All right, so let's get to the patent issue that I teased right at the front there. Patenting, I said it changed in an unexpected way. Universities file a lot of patent applications. And so you might think that just year over year it would increase. But what's interesting is that it declined. US patent applications declined by almost 5%. And remember that the actual number of disclosures increased by 8%. So the difference is even more dramatic than that 5%. You have to take away from this that universities are choosing to file patents less. And why is that? Oh, so 5% for domestic filings, and actually foreign patent filing dropped by 40%. So they almost a 1/2 reduction in foreign patent filings. And why is that? So this might not be obvious if you haven't worked in tech transfer, but there are some really negative events that can happen for a university if they invest heavily in patents, especially foreign patents. Filing in foreign countries is so much more expensive than just filing a US patent. So just about every major university can tell you a story of a time when they spent hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of dollars on a patent portfolio, and then it was never commercialized. So it was just a complete waste. And maybe the professor enjoyed having some patent filings, or maybe there were other motivations like that. Maybe the patent statistics turned out well. But in terms of a financial investment, it was a total failure. Almost every institution has a story like that. So universities are sensitive to that and have dialed back on foreign patent filings. Also, the US patent applications declined by 5%. That means that universities are trying to be more judicious in their patenting. In the past, it was maybe more typical to just patent anything that came in the door, file a patent application because why not? And probably a lot of universities, my university included, will still do that with provisional patent applications because they cost so little. But for actual full utility applications, this shows universities being more judicious and less wasteful. And why might that be? Well, so in 2024, we had a change in federal administration with the Trump election, and then that January 2025, federal funding was frozen, and it's largely come back. But there was a period where tech transfer offices and universities generally were really trying to tighten the belt and spend less. And if you're looking at ways to cut back in tech transfer, the most obvious line item would be patent expenditures. So I'm guessing universities had pressure to reduce patent spending. What'll be interesting is to see if it sticks. Now that things are kind of maybe more equilibrium, federal funding is back where it used to be. Will patent applications shoot back up by 5% or even more and catch up, or will it stay down? I think there should be a long-term trend to being a little thriftier with patent spending because there's so many tools for marketing and launching startups that you can just move faster. Why invest heavily in the patent portfolio? Just get it into the market faster. So I see that as possibly a good trend. Um, there were some other things to come out of. I'm looking at not just autumn statistics, but NSF statistics too. Interesting that the top 30 institutions in the US perform 42% of all R&D. So you have to know that the Ivy Leagues and other top schools are really disproportionately affecting all of these numbers. And so there were a couple of high profile universities that were famously under financial pressure in the past year. And so they might have distorted these numbers a little bit. But but overall, tech transfer is becoming more startup oriented, probably more software friendly, and definitely more selective about filing patents. And I see all of those as good developments.